So good morning, everybody. Welcome to ONOS TST meeting. This is a public and recorded meeting. Today we have actually two different distinct items on the agenda. One of them is kind of a more tactical in nature, how to release µONOS in the next month or so, specifically ONOS config and the pieces that it needs. And then second item is a NETCONF adapter for the µONOS config subsystem. So we're going to start with the release plan for µONOS, and I'm going to let Andrea drive this. Is that right?
That's good.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks everybody for joining. So the idea was that since we're aiming for feature complete at the end of this year for µONOS the config piece, we wanted just to get started a release process in order to release that and also any image and a complete package working with that. So a few discussions we had with the core team and other folks that have released the microservices in the past. We were thinking of starting a first release with a 0.5 version for ONOS config and a 0.2 for the rest of the services, because config is feature complete, topo, CLI, and GUI obviously are not, because they could lack some things and they could be added in the future. So we're thinking of starting 0.5 and 0.2 as a first step, try out a process, and then do it partially automatically. And then when we figure out exactly what needs to be done, then do a full automated 0.6 probably version, and 0.3 for the others. I started this document and I'd like everybody's comment on it. So the idea is that we want to release a Docker Hub image for each tagged version. We wanted to release the binaries for non-Docker artifacts. For example, the onIt command that needs to be released by itself. It's not Dockerized, so we need to just tag it and release the binary. And coming with that, we tag the Helm charts with the specific version of whatever we release. And we also provide an overarching Helm chart for service compatibility. I just posted a link there for one that it's used in Siba. And what that enables you is to just deploy that Helm chart and pull that Helm chart in turn pulls tar.gz from a web server containing every other Helm chart under the requirements. There, just, can you click on the link?
Yeah, yep.
So yeah, the idea is that this one uses three things. So basically, you have these published in a web server, and just pull them, and it automatically deploys it for you. So this would be in the first iteration of this release. My understanding would be that we will go out and release just 4 things, which is config, CLI, GUI, topo, and ONIT. Sorry, it's fine. I wouldn't touch anything else because the other microservices that we have started, like control, like certs, and the RAN and others, are not even at a point where we can actually release any of it. Yep. So I think that's good enough. So the first chart will contain just those 5 services. And as every Helm chart, this can be modified as much as we want.
Yep.
So that's kind of what my thought for release is. Thanks for the questions, Zach. The source of truth for that tag can either be what you guys are doing in Cord, meaning a version file in each repo. That's perfectly fine. Or we could use the tag of the Helm chart. That's one of 2 options. If we are looking at possibly reusing some of the Cord scripts, we might as well put the version file in there just for compatibility and not having to rework all the scripts. And I've looked at it in the different Cord repos. It's just a TXT file with a version dash dev. And a good point that Zach made is that if we wanted to be compatible with go-get packages and the vendors, it has to start with V something. There's just, I don't know exactly why, but they want a V0 dot something or 1 dot something as a format of that version. So to achieve this result, what do we have to do? There's the need to create an Helm chart repo. Oh, sorry, before I go ahead, are there any questions?
Yeah, one question. At least in Volta, the Helm chart version defines a release version. And then a Helm chart can contain any number of different versions of pod definition Docker images. Is that the same kind of philosophy you're going to follow here?
We were not thinking of decoupling the Helm chart versioning from the Docker image version. We might have to version the overarching Helm chart with the same with versioning, because that is kind of contains different packages of the different microservices.
So I thought basically the release of the project would coincide with the release of the overarching Helm chart. Is that what your question was, David?
Well, the version, right? The Helm chart defines a version, because the Helm chart essentially is a bill of materials bomb.
Correct.
For the server or the system.
Exactly.
And so the version of the Helm chart,
yes,
doesn't necessarily stay in sync, coordinate with the version of each Docker image. So Helm chart, when we release µONOS 1.0, it could have Docker images, 2.1, 3.4, whatever. That's
exactly where we want to head to. We want to completely decouple the versions of the constituent components from the version of the product, which is the same thing as the version of the overarching Helm chart. Basically,
I thought I just heard the opposite of that. I thought you just said that was the op before. You just said that you weren't trying to decouple them, but now you're saying you are trying to decouple them.
So I think Andrea was answering a different thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Your question. Yeah. No, for sure, because that's why we want to rely on semantic versioning of the individual components as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Just let me take a note of that.
Because that's one thing is that we've learned from ONOS Classic right now, right? We rev everything, all of the apps, regardless of whether there has been any changes. Just to keep things in sync, but it's not strictly necessary. And so in this new, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Having that separation is nice, because if there's then just a little patch that needs to go in just on the Helm chart that doesn't change the binary or the Docker image that it uses, you can do that and then have it not change the app version that is being used by the chart.
Yep.
Okay.
And that lets Helm fixes not be coupled with binary releases.
Yeah, I apologize for the noises here. We have people working right outside our window.
How dare they?
It's been going on for 7 months.
Yeah, and they're still working on the parking lot. Okay.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good point. Thanks, Zach. So it's both decoupling. If I understood correctly, you're both talking about decoupling the version of the overarching Helm chart, but also decoupling the version of each Helm chart within the service. Is that right?
Okay. And also, are you releasing those Helm charts as a part of the same repo that contains the rest of the code?
That is currently how it's done, meaning that each repo has its own Helm chart in itself, and we were thinking of maybe I don't know if this is something that you guys have explored, and it's better to do it somewhere else, some way else.
So what it comes down to is, I have that original question about what the source of the truth is for the version tag. And so if you're putting a Helm chart and the Docker file and all the code in one repo, having a version that gets tagged, and that's the Git tag on that, it makes you wonder whether, does that tag apply to just the code, or does the version that's in the charts YAML file in the Helm chart, does that need to be kept in sync with that that Git tag? It depends a lot on what your distribution method is. In Cord, we for developers, they check out a repo and then use Helm install and pass the directory name, and they can install whatever is on disk there. Whereas we're assuming that like an operator would use those overarching Helm charts that we've also published.
I think having a Helm chart in a separate repo has been beneficial, to be honest.
And yeah, so if it depends the strategy you'd want. For example, if you decoupled the version of the chart from the version on the repo, then that makes things a little more complicated because you have two things with different versions being released from one repo. So sticking them in another repo, like in the current way that Cord does it, the Helm charts repo has a bunch of different versions. It has a version file, but that kind of means nothing other than that is what gets tagged when you do a full release of the whole platform. The individual charts within it are released independently, and we have a bunch of scripts that make sure that people are releasing them properly, that they're not changing the contents of it and then having them publish. Those we've, and the way that the Helm chart tools require is that any changes results in a new release, and all releases need to be Semver of some form. So there's a lot of details here that the Cord team worked through. I'm not saying you should just take our scripts wholesale and use them, but it would be good if you guys want design review help. I'm sure that me, Matteo, a lot of other people could probably help with that process as you guys go through this.
Right. I mean, there's no need for us to reinvent the wheel, but of course, at the same time, we don't necessarily need to do everything that you do the way that you do it.
Right. I'm saying
well, see, this is where I say why not, right? If there's a reason that you need to do something different, then
this is why not.
Then we might, right. But wait, Thomas. If there's a reason, that's great. I understand that. But there also might be, if there's something that the scripts don't work, it might be that the scripts need changing because we want to take advantage of that too.
I'd like.
Right? So I want to see a synchronization rather than a difference.
Absolutely. I'd like to do it the way that you guys would do it if you had a chance to do it again.
And then we should take advantage of that and pull that back in. So that's why I say it's a synchronization as opposed to a
correct.
fork.
So basically, exactly. I would like to do things the way that you do them, except those few things where you may not necessarily be happy that you know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I concur with that, and I don't make any claim of having all the answers. I just claim of I found all the landmines that I've tripped over. So
exactly my point. So just to clarify back on a specific, so your Docker files are with the code, but your Helm charts are separate effectively and released individually, except the overarching chart whose version corresponds to the version tag in the repo, where the Helm charts are kept, right?
That's correct. We actually have, I think the way that it's being done in Cord and Siva has been to have a separate repo for those overarching charts, but there's no reason for that. No technical reason for that. Those could all be in the official ONOS. And then that overarching version might not be Semver. It might be more marketing driven.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting point because, again, I think that even moving those Helm charts to a separate repo allows you fixing the version of the Helm chart without having to make a new release of the binary for the service, for every service.
So the one thing that it is sort of a negative about this process is that, let's say that there is a new binary release. Let's say you go from 0.5 to 0.6. You have to do that in ONOS config. You have to wait for the containers to get published. Then you need to publish your new Helm charts, check that your Helm charts work with the new version. I'm assuming there's some CI process you have in place to verify that the Helm charts are working and valid. And then that version would get released and tagged and published to HTTP.
More of a staged process, but the whole thing is staged in nature anyway, right? I don't think there's any way to really circumvent them unless you want to completely bypass the validation, which is
right. Just realize that it's a commit on the code repo, and then also a commit on the Helm chart repo, and it involves bumping versions down the line, which if there's a lot of can get annoying, but it sort of what's required to make the process go.
Yep.
Okay. It's a good point. Might discuss about it and see what. I think it has some advantages, decoupling the Helm charts in his own repo.
And that's what Cord is doing today now.
What Cord is doing today, I think that a lot of projects are actually doing that. Okay. Then there's a few things we need to do on each service. Currently, I was discussing with Ray, the makefile is able to use just the latest in.
It's not just a makefile. There's scripts that push the Docker images. There's a few places where we're.
But it's mostly so it's from makefile and up, meaning towards the CI.
It's the CI process basically.
Yeah, mostly the CI process.
Is right now tied to master.
Okay, so that's something that we would have to do to be able to release this. Okay. I think that pretty much sums it up. We'll have to make the call on the repo for the Helm charts or not, and then start creating some of these things. The overarching Helm chart could be just with latest for now, I think. We'd have to put in place the web server chart that's key to this. And
well, I assume we would be able to use just set up a new, essentially a virtual web server on the same physical machine, right? Or on the same AMI.
Probably
yeah, that's fine. I can help with that.
Okay.
Getting a web space or doing it. Damien posted something in the chat about a tool, chart releaser. I don't think that existed when the Cord process was created.
Oh.
The other weird thing about the Helm chart process is you have to have a way to persist the existing chart repo and then modify it. Otherwise, you end up re-releasing new things, and it causes cache invalidation. I'm not sure whether this tool solves that issue. Yeah, it's worth looking at. If there's something else that exists that already does this that can replace our own tool, let's use it.
Is that something you would be able to help look at, Zach?
Yeah. Let me see exactly how this works.
The reason I ask is you're in better position to compare it to what you guys use today and whether it would be adequate for you.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It'll be adequate for us, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it. The biggest question is how it actually stores what it's actually using as a persistent backend.
Got it.
I think just by looking at it, the README file was mentioning GitHub pages or something like that.
Host their own chart repos.
Yeah, create repositories on GitHub pages by uploading chart packages. Maybe you could use that as the web server instead of putting up your own. Maybe.
Possibly.
Yeah, that would be fine. The big thing is that it can't replace in place a chart with a newly generated copy, because that will then cause you have multiple versions of the same chart, and that causes people to have trouble on the other when they do it.
You can't replace the chart should be immutable resources.
Why would you have to do in place replacement? I mean,
just to make that they don't do that.
Yeah, you shouldn't do that. That's what our automation does, and I'm assuming this does too.
Okay, perfect.
That's just something to one of those problems that we ran into when trying to engineer the process.
Ah, okay. Thanks. One thing we did not discuss is when we would like to have this done. From a date perspective.
Well, at the latest, I was thinking about that. At the latest, I would like to have it released when we release ONOS 2.3. At the latest, which is the third week of January.
20th of January.
24th of January. But if you can do that, but there's no reason you need to do it to tie it. I'm just saying the time frame wise. But I would like to actually do it earlier if possible. I mean, I think what we should do is start working towards it now.
Yeah.
And may possibly even do a 0.5 release manually before Christmas, if you can. But if you're not, if that's too much, then no problem. But so I'd like to do it as close to the new year as possible. At the latest, at the end of January.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we could create the overarching Helm chart, the Helm chart repo, that stuff we can easily do.
Yeah, so exactly the things that we know need to get done, we should just do them.
Sure.
And then so that things are lined up and.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That was all on my side for the release plan. Anybody has any questions, comments that you guys want to address on this?
Just a quick comment. So in the ONOS docs, we use the GitHub tags for versioning. So probably we should consider that as well to be synced with the content of the documents, because people refer to that docs to run the Helm charts on it or all other stuff. So probably some sort of synchronization needed for the release tags and also the Helm charts.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so the externally facing docs.
Yeah, we should release the docs too. That's this year. Yep.
Yeah.
So we use GitHub tags. So whatever we do here in terms of releasing Helm charts, we also need a tag, and that tag should be synced with the Helm charts. Otherwise, so the docs will be confusing. So people don't know that which Helm chart should be used for this specific version of docs.
Correct.
So,
good point. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So,
Andrea, I'm a little fuzzy on the. Right now, it's only on it. I don't know if there'll be other things like this, but we have these non-Docker artifacts.
Yes.
Do they live on a web server similar to the Helm charts, or do we tell people do a go get of a specific tag and then?
Basically, yeah, I would do a go get of. Right now, it's on it. I think.
I think on it is the only thing it is right now.
The on it command is the only thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, go get version something, and we release it. It's kind of kubectl. We can look at what kubectl is doing for that. That's the
kubectl you have to install via brew or one of those guys. I don't think we need to go that far.
No, but I guess they release it somehow. They tag it somehow in the repo.
Yeah, and then they host it on some.
Exactly. They host it. We don't, because it's a Go command. We just go get. So I think we just have the same tag as the on it images, because on it produces both on the test images,
right?
The test runner images,
right?
And the test binary, the command. So we just
so basically, as far as I know, this is a Git tag. I mean, if we just tag the Git repository, people can do a go get of a specific version, and that would be what knows this.
That's good. It's less work. I'll have another stupid web server.
Yeah, and if for regarding the Go versioning, we can just slap the V in front of it.
Yeah.
But I don't think for the external version we don't need to carry that extra V. It's just.
Okay, so what you're saying that just raised something in my brain here. If we're going to release version stuff, We need a way for people to query the version from the software. First question is going to be, what version are you running? And they're going to go, I don't know. I mean, if we want to support these things at all, we need to have some kind of a tag in the source code that we can interrogate, either in the box or
the Go way of doing that. You can set, I think it's LD flags or something. You can set a flag at compile time that the Go compiler will fill in, and that's usually what's used. If you look at the chord control or volt control tools, both of them are doing that and have a full, like, down to the commit hash of what was added.
Oh, nice.
So that's a solved problem. We can point you at.
Like global variables or something?
Yeah, so it's done by passing, when you run go build, you set the, you use that. And what it's doing then is we just have a make file that reads those out of Git or reads the version file and passes them to Go.
I think there is also a few other ways of doing it. If it's deployed in Kubernetes, you just describe the pod and you get the tag of the image, and that's a way of doing it.
So I guess it's only ON it. It's probably the only thing that.
Yeah, because if it's versioned as an image, it's going to be deployed to the Helm charts, and we precisely know what we are deploying with an Helm chart and what people are deploying. And the ON it command is, yeah, we could probably do it. Like
CLI also. Because you can run the CLI from inside that special CLI pod. It should be able to.
Oh, that's an image that we tag. The CLI image.
The CLI image is the shell, though, and it builds.
I just know
it builds like
people,
5. It draws from 5 other things.
When people ask you,
yeah, well, but
is this a bug? The first thing you do is say, type kubectl-v, go-v, java-version, to find out what the software thinks it is. That's all I'm getting at. So any of these, even if we produce them in images, I think anything that you can invoke should have a -- version.
Okay, sure, we can probably put that in.
And it sounds like, based on what Zach said, it sounds like this is a straightforward thing to do with those.
I wonder, is there a case for putting it in like a gRPC service? So that you might be able to tell from a gRPC call what version ONOS config is running. I'm just thinking from the GUI perspective, somebody might want to see what's the status of the system, and read the versions.
Right. Also from the CLI, if you look like a kubectl is designed to say, look, I can go out and reach out to everything that I talk to and report its version too, including its Git commit.
Yeah, I agree.
Whether we get that from the Kubernetes container or from, just directly talking to the component, I suppose it could work both ways.
Yeah, that's probably a better approach, because telling us what version of client we're using is not really all that meaningful.
That's not true. It actually does both. It tells you the version of the client as well as the version of the things it's talking to. Because sometimes you'll have errors that are, this client version has problems talking to this server version.
Sure.
So you kind of get the full material or the full list of what you're dealing with.
Right. That's
especially on the GUI. If the protobufs are like out of sync, it's just not going to work. The GUI is like a complicated client, I guess you could say.
Yeah, so we should definitely look into that. But I don't think that's necessarily something we need to do in a 0.5.
Oh,
we should continue the release process, and then this is something.
Basically, whenever we decide we're going to actually do a quote-unquote support branch, that's when we have to have
exactly. Yes, I agree.
Because I don't think we're making any commitment to go back and fix problems in these.
No. At the moment,
milestone releases.
These really only exist to work out the release process.
I think the first one that will have maybe that commitment is going to be 1.0.
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe.
Oh.
Okay.
So I think I want to make sure we leave enough time for a discussion of the NetConf adapter. Yeah. So we'll take the rest of these items then offline. I think we have enough feedback for running this. So Sean, did you want to present, or do you want me to just run the presentation?
You can run the presentation, Thomas. I'll just introduce what brought it up. Really, we were just talking I was talking to Mark from Juniper about what outbound adapters would look like. You know, not everybody has gNMI devices out there, and you know, we did talk about NETCONF adapter. From our perspective, we don't have an exact use case from it, but I thought it's something that, you know, maybe if we put some structure in place, maybe other people, maybe the Juniper guys could be adding to it. And I just wanted to get the conversation going. So Mark and I were talking through this earlier, and we threw around a few ideas. You know, I just threw down the sort of the baseline here. I think for me, as a NetConf adapter, would have to be a separate microservice on its own, and also ONOS config and ONOS topo. We wouldn't be looking at modifying them in any major way to suit any particular southbound protocol. So I tried to start thinking of, like, you know, what would be necessary for a NetConf adapter. Would it have to have dynamic configuration? Would it have to have static configuration? You know, and obviously it's going to have gNMI northbound out of it, NetConf southbound. But you know, would there be many of them? Would there be, you know, replicas? You know, would atomics have to be involved? Could we do the whole thing, you know, stateless? And one way of driving this, maybe from the ONOS topo perspective, is you know, for each device that we create in there, representing the real device, we could maybe have the address as being, you know, the NetConf, which is basically the NetConf pod, and I don't know, maybe it's a bit ludicrous talking about a port per device. On the other hand, they might all have the same port, but might have a different target, for instance. And then when ONOS config would send down a gNMI command, it would be sending us to maybe the NetConf adapter, you know, the main port, and it's got a target set in there so that the NetConf adapter knows which device to send it to. So really, that's as far as it went, and I just wanted to open the discussion to people to see what you guys thought.
A first thought is, so you have one NetConf adapter with per multiple devices. I'm debating if that is the best case, because I was more thinking of an architecture where there was a one-to-one mapping of an adapter to a device. And
that could be quite possible too, Andrea. Yeah, I wouldn't rule that out. See what people think of it.
And that's more because you're removing a single point of failure by doing so. Worst case, if the adapter fails, you lose one device. It probably strongly simplifies the device because it's a one-to-one mapping northbound to southbound in terms of high-level requests. Sure, you have to do the translation, but that's just translating the message. You don't have to, like, pick the target and stuff like this. So I would go for that, but I'm open to hear anybody's suggestion.
So I mean, you could get a large number of pods really quickly, right? You want some environment with 50 switches.
Well, it doesn't have to be many pods. You could put it as a sidecar.
But a sidecar to what, Andrea?
Of config itself.
The sidecar has the same address as doesn't it? I don't know.
Might have to look into it. Yeah.
Anyway, I'm not necessarily. I mean, I think the architecture should allow for both, right? So it doesn't really matter which target you speak to. We just need to make sure that we have a way to address the target behind the adapter, and whether it's with overloading the ports as you suggest, or whether it's with having a unique address for the container as Andrea suggests. But I think both options should be. So when I was sorry, Thomas, continue. Right?
Well,
my point was, I'm not sure where the complication lies here with respect to Andrea's comment, but maybe I'm missing something.
Hey guys, this is Damien from Juniper. What's the expectation for the number of devices that will be managed under this?
We said 50, right?
Yeah, I think our kind of goal for the µONOS was to be able to support network with 50 devices, 5,000 switches. I mean, those is kind of just a ballpark goal.
So if it's 50 devices, you might have to have 50 adapters. So
yeah, the idea is this is basically kind of like a edge environment, right? So hence that number of devices.
Okay, so you don't see any configuration applications applying configuration against thousands of devices?
Not at the moment. I don't think there's anything that prevents us to scale to that level, but at least in the first few iterations, we're going to stick to 50.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you're going to spin up a pod per device, then clearly that means you would have very significant resources from a Kubernetes perspective to support that, which would mean that from a Juniper's perspective, a relatively small switch network of 6,000 or 7,000 devices would require significant amount of Kubernetes resource for this configuration application to support that model.
Right, and that's precisely why I kind of commented that way, because even with 50, it's a lot. So,
so I mean,
especially if it's something that's stateless, then I don't see a reason we need to blow it out like that.
Yeah,
I'm sure guys, you are aware that Google recommend no more than 99 pods on a single physical server. So if you're scaling from that perspective, it would mean that we'd have to go to our customers and say that you need 10 physical servers to support a few thousand devices in a Kubernetes environment.
Yeah,
and that's not going to be an option for us.
I agree with that. Yeah. So which is why I said we should allow basically many to one type of mapping. I mean, a one-to-one is clearly the generic case of that. But if you have the flexibility of allowing many to one, then you inherently get the other one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I guess extending the same issue, if the model is to expose ports on the network adapter to identify different devices, we're very quickly going to run out of space, port space on these implementations. I mean, if there's an option where we can pass a target that identifies a device, I think that's the preferable solution.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say so. We should definitely strive for the target instead of the port. And then you could have an internal mapping to the adapter that is configured to know.
Right.
Basically, that's the target and that's the port for that target.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, you know, you might want a situation where you have many replicas of the NetConf adapter, and that's kind of where I was thinking, you know, the atomics might come in. You know, you'd have you configure each one of the network devices you wanted in the adapter, and then you'd have the leadership or mastership for each device. Then would establish a kind of an affinity for that device to a particular, you know, replica of the NetConf adapter, and you'd be able to spread the load.
Right. The question is, do we need to be at all stateful like that?
I would go for a more stateless approach because if we can, that would just simplify our life a lot. And I don't know, maybe Jordan, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe a master standby is good enough. And in this case, just maybe 2 instances with an active-passive scenario in Kubernetes.
Yeah, I mean, my thought was that you can have as many of these as needed in order to distribute the load over the devices, but in terms of sharing state, they don't necessarily need to share state, right? Unless we want.
No, it was only sharing like an identifier.
Yeah,
really is all I was thinking of persisting.
Guys, we're obviously not familiar with Atomics, so we're not sure what capability it provides, but we built products like this previously for Juniper, and where we have a one-to-many adapter for talking to the devices. Typically, we have a state sharing mechanism that has leadership activities that allows us to put in a pool of targets and have individual instances take ownership for a subset of those targets. So that in the event of an adapter failure, the algorithm in the background will reallocate the devices that were previously managed by the field adapter across the remaining adapters.
Yeah.
Is that not how? I mean, I'd be concerned that we would expend effort implementing an active standby solution and then immediately be asked to deploy in a network where the capacity couldn't support that, and we would have a requirement to scale horizontally. At which point in time we'd have to re-architect the solution.
Yeah. So I think that's a good point. I mean, I was but I was talking about stateful. I was thinking. I was excluding the distribution, the mechanism for distribution of work or distribution of responsibility.
Okay.
I was hoping to avoid having another intermediate layer that maintained the replication of the configuration itself. Right?
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that this is as thin of a pass-through adapter as possible from gNMI to protocol effectively. And then if clearly, in order for deployment purposes, we need to ensure that there is a ability to fail over from one adapter, basically for one adapter to assume responsibility for a set of devices that have been now orphaned by a failure of a different instance of the adapter, then for that, yeah, clearly, if there is a way to have a way of basically having a synchronization mechanism, mastership mechanism, then that's
I think
fine.
Yeah, I think what Thomas said is right. So the work of partitioning, partitioning work is fairly easy. I don't think this needs some mechanism for actually replicating state, but the goal of partitioning is just to make sure that requests are going through the same adapter, because you get consistency issues if requests are going all over the place, taking different paths to the device. That's all that we need to avoid, but as long as, I guess, requests are going through the same adapter, then you alleviate the potential consistency issues, but you don't need to replicate state. So I think that would be fine. Fairly simple.
Okay, so I guess one other question that we would have, do you see this being a southbound flow only? So obviously in a lot of the platforms that we currently manage that offer NetConf interfaces, there are notification mechanisms for indicating state change for configuration. So do you see the solution only being requests originating from the ONOS config box, going southbound in the adapter and going towards the device? Or do you see
I would have seen it going northbound as well, Damien. I mean, I think the mechanisms are there in gNMI to support those kind of notifications.
Okay.
Yep.
To subscribe, not general purpose notifications, but notifications on configured objects. Is that what you mean?
Correct, yeah. And it's basically, it would just be whatever is required to conform to the gNMI API.
Okay.
So which basically is all request response with the exception of the subscribe mechanism, which effectively is a request and then long-standing request effectively, right? With
I mean, you could easily map NetConf notification stream to the gNMI subscription stream.
Well,
okay, so that makes it stateful then. So I mean, that's the point for raising this. Obviously, if you're just looking at notifications, the outbound request is originating from one of those adapters, and then the traffic's been routed back across the same TCP session. In the event that there's a failure of either the adapter or something in the middle, then that potentially needs to be moved.
So I would imagine that the failure of the adapter would be reflected in a loss of a channel, says the gNMI channel on the application side, like on ONOS config, and that would have to be reestablished with a new adapter as a reconnect to the device effectively, and so that would have to be followed with a resubscribe. That's what I was
also on NetConf. There is a possibility of having general purpose notifications, not just related to configuration.
Well, but
And that's kind of why I put in gNMI and gRPC and those kind of things as well. You know, that there might be other flows here that are not exactly config related.
But Sean, those notifications still have to adhere to the model expressed by the device. It cannot be random blob.
No, they're defined in Yang, but they don't necessarily have to be associated with a configured object, if you know what I mean.
Well, I think if they're configured in Yang, nothing prevents us to have the path of that Yang tree to be included in the state, in our state cache, and then just be subscribed for. Is that something that you think it doesn't work?
You're talking about operational notifications, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, well, just notifications that you might define in any Yang on NetConf. They don't exactly have to have an associated object. They can be like top level, you know, related, if you know what I mean, rather than would say something relating to some configured object or state object in the Yang tree. So,
Sean, it doesn't have to be at all tied to configuration. It can be like whatever path in Yang, we can subscribe to it. So that's what it was mentioned. It could be operational state. Operational state is not tied to any configuration or state.
I know, but it's associated with a named leaf or container or list.
That's
what I'm saying. There's a possibility of having notifications on things that aren't even related to a leaf or a container, regardless of whether they're operational or config.
So,
well, they should be still tied to a certain path.
They don't have to be. I mean, we can deal with that when we come to it. I mean, if Juniper's Yangs all relate to paths, that's fine. But I'm going from my experience of Yang previously. I've defined notifications that weren't associated with a particular path. Sorry, Thomas, go ahead.
No worries. Sorry, I jumped in. It was my bad. My suggestion would be to primarily view it through prism of gNMI and then gNOI initially. And then, so with gNMI, it's clearly just for config and operational state. Basically, that's for the named entities in, and basically that kind of excludes the the RPC entities of the Yang model, right? And the gNOI is where that would hook in. But really, we are interested in only in those that conform to the gNOI interface. And then we can
like set certificate and set time and reboot, those kind of things.
And rotate certificates and all of that stuff, exactly. And we can worry about the arbitrary gRPC at some later point in time. Maybe if there is an vendor-specific extension mechanism for them to be able to make it accessible to apps. But I would worry about that as kind of a tertiary thing. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense, guys? Like, for example, in the case of your Juniper devices, are the notifications tied to a certain specific subtree of the Yang model?
No, they're not. So you can subscribe to different subscription sets, some based on configuration and some generic. But guys, just to be clear, obviously we'll target gNOS as a day one requirement from our perspective, but the intent is that it would be multi-vendor.
Oh, okay.
Right. Sure.
It would be interesting, at least from my perspective, to understand better this notification gap that we might have, to get an example of what you guys send up and how this ties within the whole system. Could that be possible, even just a document with a few notifications that you guys send up and how they tie to the Yang models or not tie to the Yang models?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, where we're at the moment is that we're really still in evaluation of the product to just make sure it satisfies our longer term requirements. If that's okay, then we'll allocate resource to it. So the guys that are on the call at the moment, Simon, Kieran, and Mark would be part of the team that would participate in this activity. So really what we're looking is to understand from your side what the minimum requirements would be for the NetConf adapter, and then for ourselves to take a view on, in addition to that, what would we need to satisfy our longer term aspirations around the application functionality. Make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, from our perspective, I mean, I think it would probably be something that we would host. I guess it would be like ONOS project / NetConf adapter.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no intent that there would be any IPR retained here, Sean.
Right.
From Juniper's perspective, it would be a standard OSS contribution from Juniper.
Yeah, very good. And that's something we could probably do straight away, Andre. I think there's probably even set up a repo and put some things in place.
Right. So we decided we want to keep it with just go with a target-based approach rather than just port-based. Clearly, there still have to work out the details of how those adapters should be configured to take ownership of the NetConf devices behind them, and how it would reflect them as essentially a set of targets that are being represented, right? At the adapters. What changes do we expect on a Topo side?
So, I mean, there is a target field already there on the ONOS, on the device in ONOS Topo. There's a field called target, and it's a string value. I mean, we could just fill that in. I want to take a look through it again just to see what would be needed from the ONOS config side. I mean, that target field, I think, isn't filled in when we make a gNMI request southbound, but that's something we could do. Would we have to have a special branch or switch in the code if you're sending down to an adapter? I think we might be able to get away without having some special code for dealing with adapters. That would be my hope.
Yeah, I think let's start an evaluation on this. I might suggest that we do at least a first release without touching too much of this. The target.
Oh yeah, no. I think that's perfectly fine. This is something I can follow on later. And clearly the adapters themselves will require their own configuration that will be specific to how they're done, right? Because the idea is that we support adapters in general. So this particular adapter will have a set of configurations, meaning like a configuration that it requires in order to operate, in order to know which devices to take custody of and things like that, and how to divide responsibility, how to run the mastership and all of that stuff.
So at the moment, guys, so for example, for communicating with the device, where do you currently store the credentials or the certificates? At the moment, they're stored in config itself. We're working on a ONOS certs subsystem, which basically will leverage the certificate systems inside Kubernetes. Probably Adib and Jordan can comment more on this.
Well, actually, I think they're configured in Topo, Andre, and they're the username for the southbound. We get that from Topo.
Well, so yeah, this is a work in progress. So Topo, so we do have fields in Topo for storing credentials, but we currently don't propagate them to config and things like that. This is still something that Adib is working on a lot. So
actually, there are two problems that we need to solve. I discussed it with Jordan. Something is about secret management. So, and another thing is about the certificate management. So the solutions that are out there for the Kubernetes certificate management are technology dependent. It means that they provide a set of issuers, they support a set of issuers so that you can get certificates from them. So, and then we can implement a sample certificate management subsystem to get certificates from those from those issuers and then store them in the secret, in the Kubernetes secret. So this is the question that you are asking, or you are asking about how we manage secrets in the Kubernetes?
No, I guess it's the same thing. So it's just to understand whether the adapter would have a requirement to retrieve the credentials for talking to the device from the Kubernetes secret API, or whether they would be passed across from ONOS config as part of the gNMI request.
I think the second one. I think we will treat it as a gNMI device meaning that we will pass over everything that is needed to make the connection to it. And if that is the same that is used towards the device, then it should be good to go.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, we can use, I mean, there is the possibility of extensions on gNMI as well if there's something we need to pass in-band, you know, between ONOS config and the adapter. You know, on a per request basis, we can come up with some mechanism like that too.
And also, gNMI has a certificate subsystem, certificate service,
right,
that is responsible to push certificates onto the devices and rotate the certificates onto the devices. So it means that if we implement the gNMI certificate service, probably we don't need to do anything about that. So we just need to use this service that is responsible to manage certificates on the devices. The only thing that we need to do, we need to provide certificates in the secrets, in the Kubernetes secrets, and gNMI use these certificates to push them into the devices.
Yeah, and obviously that fits well for customers that use certificates on the device, but it's still a 50-50 split. A lot are still using username and password for SSH connections over NetConf. Sean, the target information that currently exists in an ONOS topo, does it include a placeholder for the NetConf port on the device?
No, but there is a general purpose string to string map, so we could add fields there as we need it.
Okay.
But I think that's a valid point. We ought to make sure that our certificate subsystem does allow for tracking other types of credentials.
Yeah, password.
Right, the username, password.
Username, password.
Yeah, we have username and password in topo. So.
Yeah, and like I say, I mean, you can pass those from ONOS config in-band into gNMI, you know, through an extension if you really needed to bring it down into the NetConf adapter and pass it through.
I would prefer if over time we basically extract that information out of ONOS topo and maybe just cross-reference it into the ONOS subsystem.
Oh yeah.
Over time.
Guys, sorry, one last question. Apologies, and I'm showing my ignorance of what you've done. Is there any tenant support in the product? Because a lot of our configuration applications require essentially rules-based access for different config operations, and typically the credentials associated with the individual roles are provisioned differently on the device, although they may be back-end on a centralized authentication system. So it's not a one-to-one mapping in a lot of cases between the config change and the device credentials. You know, you can have multiple config changes happen in parallel, being originated by different classes of users.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were hoping to use the RBAC of the Kubernetes containers, how exactly we link different config operations and sections of the config to those roles. We haven't done any work on yet, I don't think.
And I think this is a good place where we don't have a lot of expertise in such day-to-day management and user-based access and role-based access for different types of teams within an organization, and where you guys could definitely contribute a lot of your expertise and your operations expertise in the form of requirements to the whole system.
Okay. Any of the other Juniper people on the call, do you have any questions while we have the team on? Kieran, Simon?
I suppose not. Okay. Oh, he said not from me. Got it. There's an answer already. So I think we're a little bit past the time right now, so we can probably wrap it up. We can discuss probably on a µONOS Slack channel then creating the repository. Do we want the same name like NetConf-adapter, or? Maybe
we should put SB in there for southbound just to make it clear.
or something like that. Okay. So let's discuss the specifics of the repo creation, and then we can maybe discuss some of the more tactical specifics in that channel as well to continue discussion. Is that right?
I think if anybody wants to summarize some of the thoughts that we have put in today, that would be good. So in one of the next meetings, we could.
I can do that, Andrea.
Thanks, Sean. So in one of the next meetings, we could delve a little bit more down into some of the aspects of each of the things we talked about and get some more concrete plan in place to do the actual development or at least provide an architectural discussion with details that anybody could take on.
All right.
The implementation side.
Okay. So let's wrap up. I think this is our last TST meeting for 2019. So everybody have happy holidays, good new year, and we'll see you in 2020.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thanks
guys.
everybody. Bye.